mazurka is in 3/4. But it's a particular kind of 3/4 sort of, and basically it's a 3/4 where every count is important. So the mazurka and a waltz can often seem very similar, but a waltz, you kind of think about the first count as being important. So it goes, so you might do something where you're jumping and you're landing on the first count, and whereas in a mazurka, you might think of all the counts being important, so you might have something that happens on each count. For example, you might do pirouettes and your head might turn on each count, so one and dun, 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 dun. So I think that's a good way to think about the difference between a waltz and a mazurka. But in real life, they're very blurred. Like, you often get a waltz that has a mazurka feel. You often get, so lots of waltzes become kind of mazurka-ish, especially when you play them in ballet class. But a mazurka is it's in 3/4, and it has counts that count. All 3 counts of the bar count, and so if you were going to count it, you'd count. There's different ways to count it, and one way is to count 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and another way to count it would be a 1 2 3 a 2 2 3 a 3 2 3 a 4 2 3, and another way to count it would be a 1 2 3 a 4 5 6 a 1 2 3 a 4 5 6. You might choose different ways of counting it depending on what you're doing, depending on how your students are picking it up. If you've got things happening on count 5 and 6, then you might really want to count it like that. But and then that's how I'd count it. I'd count it differently depending on what was happening, but probably I'm most likely to count it a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and because I think that makes sense. So this is one of those ones where you can have different ways of describing the instruction depending on what's happening. So if you counted it like I just said, 1 and 2 and then you could say, can I have 2 counts in, because those were the counts I just said, weren't they? And we heard 2 of them, so you could say 1. So the 2 counts in will be 7 and 8 and that would be fine. And you could have 4 counts in, and that would sound like 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and. But this is where mazurkas get a bit complicated, because if you counted them differently, for example, you counted them a 1 2 3, 2 2 3, or you counted them a 1 2 3. 4 5 6 a 1 2 3, then you can't say the same number of counts in. Now it's the same amount of music in, but it's not 2 counts in anymore, 4 counts in anymore. Now it's 6 counts or 12 counts in, so probably 6 counts in. So that's going to go a 1 2 3 4 5 6, 1 2 3 4 5 6. So they're all going to sound the same. They're all going to sound like this. This is the 2 counts in, or the 6 counts in version, which sounds fine. And this is the 4 counts or 12 counts version. And that sounds fine as well. So if we're thinking of those, if we're counting it, well, depending on how we count it, we can think this is the only time in this and a Polonaise when we might like to think about saying bars instead of counts. Because mazurkas are definitely in 3/4, so you can only really say the counts if you know the time signature. But with a mazurka, you do know the time signature. You know that every mazurka rhythm is 1 bar. So this might be easier to get rid of any confusion to say if we've been counting a 1 and 2 and or we've been counting a 1 2 3 4 5 6. This is where it might be good to say 2 bars in, please, and then 2 bars would sound like. And then you're kind of getting rid of all this mazurka confusion. You're out of trouble if you just remember we do instructions to mazurkas in bars. So instructions to mazurkas is in bars, and that's the reason we do bars, because we count them differently depending on what we're doing, and it can get really confusing. Okay. So in the Cecchetti grades, we often get mazurkas in at the end of the bar in the kind of a chappé releve exercises. So in grade 3, at the end of the bar, we're doing a chappés and releves exercise, and it's on a mazurka, and it sounds like this. So you can hear how we might count it differently. We might count and a 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2. Or we might count and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So there's two different ways of counting it. They're both correct. Both of them are fine. But then the problem comes in the introduction. With one of those versions, you could say you can have 2 counts in, and one of the versions you have to say you can have 6 counts in, but they both mean the same thing. It depends on how you count it. Or we could just solve all those problems by saying you can have 2 bars in, and then that would be. That's it. So a famous mazurka is going to be from the ballet. It's not really going to be from anywhere else. And there's a famous one in the ballet Coppelia, and it's the one I played at the beginning. And then there's also a famous mazurka in Swan Lake that goes. So take your pick. So what can it be used for? It can be used for demi-point exercises, things like chappés and relevés, things where you want it's good for chappés and relevés because it kind of goes, because it's got 3 separate counts in each bar, then it can have that feeling of like going up, up, down, up, up, down, up, up, down. And mazurkas are good for that. That's why you want to use them. And then the other thing it's good for is pirouette exercises, because it has that kind of rhythm of where your head spins. So you go, preparation and head, down. And mazurkas kind of have that in them. Whereas but people will often say can have a waltz for pirouettes. And then in the ballet class, I'd often play a waltz, but it's more, has a mazurka feel to it, really. There's lots of waltzes that have a mazurka feel, and there's lots of kind of confusion about when to use a waltz and when to use a mazurka. That doesn't really mean much to musicians, because they're just going to play a mixture. It's going to be it's not like mazurkas are different to waltzes. They are, but there's a big mixed area here. It's like, red and green, and then you mix the paint together, you get all brown, I guess. You couldn't say that when the red ends and when the green ends. It's like, there's a vague area in the middle. The only thing I would say about mazurkas is you don't really use them for allegro, where you do one thing where there's like one step in a bar, like I was saying earlier. So you wouldn't go, but you might do it for something like ballet compose and ballet sample and that kind of things, like allegro exercises or part of basque or something like that. Allegro exercises where they have separate counts. So part of basque goes and the ballet sample goes. I think I mean ballet compose. It goes like in and out and in and out. So a mazurka fits those kind of allegro as well. So if I was in a ballet class or in a DDE exam and I said, can I have a mazurka please? I'd like 2 bars in. A 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that would be fine. Or I might say, can I have a mazurka please? I'll have 4 bars in. 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 1 and 2, 3, 4 and 5, 6. 1 and 2, 3, 4 and 5, 6. So it's confusing. Those are your kind of options. I'd say this is the one where you want to count your introduction in bars. There's not many times when I think it's a good idea to use the word bars in ballet class, but this is a time because a mazurka is definitely in 3/4. Yeah, that's it.